This, ladies and gentlemen, is football.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Total A-Leagues. I'm Vince Regari. I'm glad to be back in the chair. Thanks to James Dodd for looking after this thing while I've been away. Tommy Orr, good to see you.
Likewise, welcome back.
Thank you. Kind of wish I was still on holiday, but no, not at the moment actually, when there's so much happening in Australian football and good stuff too that we'll get stuck into. A probable game of the season we'll dissect, Tommy, between Auckland and Adelaide. Look ahead at the finals, the race, the Johnny Warren race as well. But we've got to start with, the biggest thing in Australian football at the moment, a historic success, just our third trophy in Asia since we switched from Oceania. The young Socceroos, we're fortunate enough to have the coach of the victorious team at the Asian Cup, Trevor Morgan, with us. Trevor, thanks so much for joining us.
Welcome.
Thank you.
How did it feel, Trevor, to come home? I saw you had a bit of a reception at the airport on Monday to come home with the trophy and the reception that you did have from friends, family and probably a couple of fans as well.
Great feeling, I think, for a coach. Obviously, the main joy is seeing the players be successful. To bring home a trophy like that is something the boys haven't done before. And I think, a great start for them in their careers.
Trevor, first of all, congratulations. Obviously, it goes without saying, such a huge achievement. Just want to hear your thoughts. How would you kind of summarise the tournament? Because, as the tournament kind of evolved, we saw, the team kind of performances seem to get better and better. And, if we look at your comments after a lot of the games, you were sometimes fairly critical, in a positive way, but critical. And then sometimes you were, patting people on the back. How would you summarise the overall kind of development and how the tournament evolved?
Yeah, it's challenging, Tom, to try and keep players focused on improvement in a tournament rather than the match. You know yourself, you need to be able to play what's there in front of you as opposed to the occasion. Yep. So we tried to keep a process which we've had going for 18 months, and that is to, prepare for the match to win, to recover and review, and then to prepare again. And obviously, we have some very clear templates of what we'd like our football to look like, and it's how close can you go to reproducing that against any opponent.
Trevor, you faced all sorts of challenges throughout the tournament, different types of games, different types of goals you scored. The final was different as well, against a different kind of opponent in Saudi Arabia, and you had to win it on penalties. What did that show you, I guess, the character of the team to dig out from that situation after the way you conceded?
I think obviously, that's one of the things that Australian sport expects to see is character, and it's often actually easier to come from behind when you're not leading, to chase the lead and to go for everything. And the boys obviously had the setback. But fortunately, it's a team that's been through quite a few matches that have been challenging, and they've actually been to quite a few penalty shootouts before, because some of the tournaments we've been invited to have actually put those in as a feature of the tournament for player development. So they've actually really well prepared for penalty shootouts.
Joe, I want to ask you, because the one thing I was loving watching your football in the tournament was in terms of the front third, because so many tournaments we see Australia, go into the latter stages, but not quite have the quality in the front third to kind of win matches. But in this tournament, there was so many exciting players and standout performances going forward. You obviously scored a lot of goals. All the while, you didn't have the likes of Nestor and Kunda available, so there was a few kind of selection problems that you had. But what would you put that down to, the kind of positive displays we saw in the attacking sense? Was that something that you've worked on with the team over a long period of time? Do you think the players have a lot of individual quality? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
A combination of the two, Tom. We certainly have a front foot mentality. That's part of Australian culture. You should be attacking in your play. What we've tried to do is embrace the individual qualities of the players, so that there is a style of play, there is planned things to do, but there's not a paint by numbers approach. It's very much about getting into good areas and then providing some options, but also encouraging the boys to take responsibility and take action and make decisions.
On a related note, Trevor, a lot of people are, pleasantly surprised by this 2005 crop and how good they seem to be, and I guess people are theorising why they're so good, I guess. One thing that's been talked about is the period of time since the national curriculum came in, and is that and the A-League academies now having a delayed sort of effect Is that now paying dividends? Is it a style thing in terms of the way this team spoke about, things that you instructed them to do, as you just spoke about? Or is it, in combination with those things, the amount of football they were able to play in first team level before the tournament that allowed them to reach such a high level once they got there?
Yeah, there's always going to be multiple contributing factors. I think, COVID's helped us out a little bit in terms of young players getting game time in Australian football. It's a bit more like the NSL where there's some top senior players and they're helping bring young players through. From a development point of view, obviously any changes that you make to development take a long time to come through. For sure, with this group of players, we've tried to expose them to a lot of matches and observe how they perform in those matches. And the ones who came to this final tournament, yes, we were missing some players, but all of these players had an opportunity to play for Australia and show that they could handle some pressure and they could express themselves.
Joe, I'm going to put you on the spot here. So obviously some breakthrough kind of seasons from some of your players in the A-League, the likes of Kikianis, Jovanovic. Obviously we saw Alex Badalato, who hasn't had too many minutes in the A-League, but we saw obviously what he can do, winning player of the tournament. Do you think any of those players are ready for the step up to the Socceroos?
It's a huge step. I'm a believer in youth. That's obviously I spent quite a lot of time in youth football. I think it's really now up to the players to really kick on from this. Any experience like this should motivate them to work even harder. And obviously, for Socceroos call-up, you have to be performing at the highest level. So if they're performing really well in the A-League, then they're going to be in consideration. If they're getting moves to overseas clubs or performing in overseas clubs, they might come into consideration. But really, their performances at club level is what a national team coach can call upon in camp. And it's up to the boys to start competing and playing at the level that the current Socceroos are at.
Trevor, the other prize, aside from the trophy itself, is World Cup qualification, which is massive for Australian football. That tournament's a little bit later this year in September in Chile. How much do you expect to change between now and then in terms of the squad? And do you expect you might have players like Nestor Irankunda and others who weren't available for selection?
Again, it's not in a FIFA window. I mean, the World Cup is a massive tournament. Tommy knows himself from that as a youth player. The opportunity to play against multiple confederations in a really compacted time frame and to challenge yourself against the best players in the world of your age group. Obviously, not being a FIFA window, many other nations will also have trouble with some of their elite players. I mean, this is a tournament that could feature Lamine Yamal, but I can't see him playing an under-20 World Cup. Obviously, in the next 6 months, it's up to the players to keep improving, to be in good form, hopefully no injuries. And then obviously, we'll make approaches to clubs both in Australia and overseas to ensure we know where the boys are at. And if called up, they're ready to go.
Excellent. Well, we look forward to seeing the rest of it, Trevor, and where you can take them at the World Cup. Exciting times for Australian football. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great to chat.
How good, Tommy?
I think that achievement shouldn't be underestimated because
No way.
We've had so many attempts in that tournament and come nowhere near it many times. So to go, and it was also the manner that we did it. I think that was equally as impressive as winning it.
Like you, I've probably spent a lot of late nights, early mornings, staying up to watch youth tournaments and watching Australian teams play, and it's not that fun, usually. That's why it was so good. It was not only winning, but playing front foot football against Japan and
Exactly.
being the better team.
How many times have we seen, we're brave and we stay in the game and might nab a result against the run of play.
Not this time. This was just dominant.
Exactly. And that's so, I think it speaks volumes about what a great job the A-League clubs are doing to kind of develop this next generation. And we're kind of finally seeing the fruits of our labour, I guess.
It's so good. And I think, as we mentioned, just the first time we've won an underage tournament in Asia,
Yep.
and only the third trophy we won in Asia, aside from the Matildas 2010 Asian Cup,
Yep.
2015, you were there with the Socceroos. So it's that big.
Yeah.
We should be proud of it. We should talk it up. One thing we'll talk about now that Trevor wouldn't, no surprises there, is individuals.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go through them all and make a case for all of them.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing about youth football, right, is I think even the best sort of Brazilian, Argentinian teams of the past that have won World Cups, only 5 or 6 of them tend to go on to have massive careers that you think. So while you look at the squad at the moment and you think all of these kids can do something, and they can, the reality is only a small handful make it to the level that we hope, and I'm talking like double-digit national team caps and big club careers and all that sort of stuff. Having said that, who do you think are sort of the best placed players at the moment to take their careers forward?
Well, I think if you look at the tournament, I think the players that had the A-League experience going into the tournament, and we kind of touched on this on last week's show, but they're the ones that made the best impression to me in the tournament, because if you look at the likes of Kiki Giannis, obviously defensively, I thought he was unbelievable. And, the step from playing men's elite football in the A-League to then going against playing kids your age, I think it's a much easier transition when you have all that football behind you. So someone like Kiki Giannis was the beneficiary of that. I think that Toure in the front third, and obviously Jovanovic as well from Adelaide, I think that those three for me were the standouts in that tournament. And obviously you can't go past Alex Badalado. We obviously had him on the show last week, player of the tournament, and didn't know too much about him before that tournament, but now I'm just super excited to see him in the A-League.
Yeah. Before we talk a fraction more about him, the other one for me is Paul Ocon Jr.
Oh, yeah.
Not an A-League player, was in the Wanderers Academy though, at Benfica now. As a
great family pedigree there.
Chip off the old block a little bit in
Exactly.
terms of the midfield vision.
So
exciting he's 20 years old as well. You'd hope now in the next 2-3 years will blossom as a first team player. Maybe Socceroos, probably too early for this current cycle.
Yeah.
But after that, slot him in. We need sixes with that sort of all-round.
Technically so good, and exactly like you just said, like his father, I think that he added so much to the team. I think that if you took him out of that young Socceroos team, I think that a lot of the front third players, you wouldn't have seen them put in the performances they did. It was maybe a little bit of an unsung hero in that team.
What would the Wanderers be thinking at the moment around Badalado? Player of the tournament, hasn't really got much of a look in, not only under Alan Stajic, you can't put this all on him, the previous coach as well. It seems like the club has produced an excellent player, but overall hasn't figured out what to do with him. And the fact that he's not only on loan to a rival team, but coming off contract.
Yeah.
When you've become a player of a tournament, that alone ratchets up your value straight away.
Huge.
There's a lot of eyes will be on him now that had no idea about him previously.
Exactly.
What does that say about the Wanderers, though, that they can produce a player like this and still it's like you'd think a player who can win a trophy like that, an individual trophy like that, will be a really important part of not only your team now, but your plan as a club to realise that investment in terms of the player.
Yeah, I think if you look at the way the Wanderers play, it's kind of a 4-4-2 type situation. So they don't really typically have a number 10 type player. And we obviously have seen Juan Mata on the bench as well a lot this season. So, that similar position, similar role. So, the way that Stajic plays, and he's getting great results, this has to be said. So, but the way he's playing isn't suited to someone like that. And, you can ask questions, and we've spoken a lot about it on this show, about the club having a whole of club philosophy where what you're saying is maybe going to come to fruition, but ultimately, Stajic has only just been instilled in this role, and that's going to take some time to implement. And I think it's kind of a negative consequence that someone like this has fallen between the cracks because there've been so much chopping and changing at the club in recent years. So, it's going to be interesting because when he did, announce that he's gone to Victory on loan to the end of the season, I was a little bit confused about that because you look at how many attacking players they have. He's going to face a similar challenge at the Victory, the likes of Machach, Piscopo, Azani. So, we've seen what he can do in this tournament, but I want to see it in the A-League. So, fingers crossed he can get some minutes at Victory.
Just lastly on this group in this tournament, the players who are not in it, which sort of shows how good this crop of players is in this age group. The fact that we mentioned Iran Kunda, there's Thomas Waddingham, Dylan Leonard, Marcus Eunice over at PSV. Hayne Eames could be a wild card. He's 17,
Absolutely.
but the way he's playing at the moment could play himself into this squad. Anthony Pavlicic, the goalkeeper at Bayern Munich. You'd imagine Iran Kunda is going to be off limits, especially if he keeps going the way he is in Switzerland at the moment. So it's hard to imagine Bayern, or if they want to send him on loan again for senior football, whichever club he's at, releasing him for this tournament. The others are in play though, I think. Maybe depending on where Portsmouth are at, Waddingham, they might be using him, I'm not sure, but it just goes to show how much stronger that squad can get.
Absolutely, and I think the one thing, and we kind of touched on it before, but how many front third players there are, and that's such a problem that, that's such something that we've not really seen in the Young Socceroos ever, I don't think. This many talented players in the front third, and there's going to be some big names miss out on that World Cup squad. And, obviously Iran Kunda, you said that he might not make it. A lot of these players, and the clubs want you to go to this tournament because it's a shop window and they can see what you said before about the resale value potential. So I wouldn't be surprised to see us have a full full selection available for that tournament.
You think Bayern Munich would want to put Iran Kunda in the shop window already? They just got him.
Yeah, but if he's not getting minutes at Bayern, but at that point, think about the clubs that are watching that tournament, the biggest clubs in the world, other Real Madrid, all these clubs that have scouts at that tournament. I think that if it's in their interest to have him there.
Interesting. I hope he is, because it'll help us go deeper in the tournament.
Absolutely.
And we want to see, just imagine slotting him into that team, playing that way. It'd be incredible.
Yep.
But we'll wait and see a little bit later in the year, that one. We'll get onto the A-League itself. Tommy, Auckland 4, Adelaide 4.
Yeah.
I couldn't watch this game live, unfortunately. I was doing some stuff with my wife and I kept checking the score because I knew how important it was. And the score kept going up, and like these goals coming out of nowhere, particularly late as well.
Yeah.
I'm just like, I am missing out here. I am spewing.
It was unbelievable. I think probably the game of the season so far. I think that the other game that kind of comes close was the game that these two played against each other at Coopers maybe a couple of months ago. And it was very similar. If you look at that goal, what a goal that was. And I think that overall, if you look at the performances of both teams, I think Adelaide probably was a little bit lucky to come away with the result, but ultimately to come from behind 2 times against the team that's, been the standout team in the competition so far, to score so late again, it was a fantastic game. And
huge crowd as well in Auckland again. Like, I know, they just had the derby and there were 10,000 more there, but that's usual that you get that sort of drop-off for a non-derby game.
Yep.
But still like 16,000, 17,000 people there makes it a better game too. The atmosphere, unbelievable. The players, the way it went.
And if you're at this game, you're going to come back because it was so entertaining. And obviously they didn't get the desired result. But every game that's been played at that stadium this season, except for that home blip loss to Western United, has been a great spectacle. So it's not surprising to see them come back. And they've just gone from strength to strength this season. And ultimately, given the context and given their lead at the top of the table, a draw still is a pretty good result for Auckland.
They had the circus there, remember, as well, in the sort of as the entertainment. Who would have had their money on the circus being the least entertaining part of that entire afternoon? How good. Auckland, what a sort of addition they've been to the league.
Yeah,
so good.
Right.
I have a feeling that's not the last time we're going to see these two teams play against each other, though. That's a possible grand final matchup.
Yep.
I think, look, we'll talk all about that in a second. Let's first hear from Steve Corica. It won't shock you to know that Steve Corica had an issue with the penalty decisions. Let's hear what he said post-match about them.
Well, I'm more disappointed with some of the decisions made by the referee.
Which decisions do you take issue with?
Are you joking? 2 penalties. The 2 penalties decisions from the VAR and the referee, for me, were both soft and were wrong, in my opinion. And that changed the game. Otherwise, we probably would have won that quite comfortable.
There is contact by Estrada on Alex for the first one. You just don't think it's heavy enough?
It's soft, very soft. He went down easily. The second one also, he went through 2 players. He was always going to go down. And, the second one, they should have looked at it and got the decision right. So that's my opinion, I think. That's my take on it. I'm pretty sure, tomorrow we might get an apology as well, like we did in the first game in Adelaide when when they scored their goal. It should have been a foul on Callan Elliott, and we got an apology the next day. So, but it doesn't take back the 4 points we probably should have had extra.
I don't think they got the apology.
well, it's irrelevant if they did or didn't because they didn't get the points. So
yeah, but it'll, as I said to you earlier, it will be a cold day in hell before you hear Steve Corica talking after a match about how good the referee was. He's always got an issue. But to be fair, though, this time
I think he did have a point. The
with
second
the first one
exactly. The second, I think both were soft, but the second one you can understand why it was given,
and you can also understand why it wasn't reversed because there was enough there to give it. And it's one of those ones where it's not an obvious error, it's a dicey one that probably more people would say not a penalty than a penalty, but it looks enough like a penalty that you can't change it.
The first one, though, I think was very soft. I think he was right because, there obviously was contact, but when you freeze frame it with VAR, you lose kind of the context because there is contact, so you think therefore it's a penalty. But the contact was so minimal, the attacking player didn't even appeal for the penalty. So if the attacking player doesn't appeal, that's normally a bit of a giveaway. That's not a penalty. So, but overall, Adelaide still they kind of deserved a bit of luck in that game, and that got them back into the game. But they still had a lot of work to do. So these things can go for or against you, and for Auckland, unfortunately for them, this one was against them.
Yeah. So the question is, have they got the plate already? So upcoming, Newcastle away, Central Coast at home, Brisbane away, Wanderers at home, Sydney away, Victory away. A team like this can win all of these games.
And the last 3 games are 3 tough games, though. And I think that Newcastle's obviously is on a great little run at the moment. So I think this weekend's quite a tough game and under the radar tough game. But I think the next 2 games against Brisbane and the Mariners, if you're going off previous form, then that's 6 points for Auckland. You would expect. So if they go 6 points from the next 3 games, then I think that it's almost impossible to catch them.
Yeah, it's a classic one hand on the plate situation at the moment for me.
Yeah.
Adelaide, it's important to recognise as well that finishing second this season to a Kiwi team is still huge because they can't qualify for the AFC Champions League elite. So whoever finishes second will not only get that, but they'll get the week off in the finals as well, which is really important.
Yeah.
There's a lot of possibly dangerous floaters in the bottom half of the ladder you don't want to be playing against. So if you can skip that and get yourself within 1 game of a grand final, that's big.
And you look at Auckland's probably been the standout team, but anyone from 2nd place to 8th in MacArthur, any of those teams on their day can beat anyone. So in a one-off elimination final, like you just said, the difference between coming 2nd and 3rd in this table is quite significant.
Yeah. So Adelaide coming up have Brisbane at home, MacArthur at home, Victory away, Sydney at home, Perth away, Wellington home. Do you back them to grab that 2nd spot?
Yeah, I think it's between them and Western United because obviously now they've got the boost of having these young Socceroos back, the likes of Kikianis. I think Kikianis was a big loss for them defensively.
I think you could have seen that, but not to the extent that it turned out to be.
Yeah.
Like Bart Vereen's is a lesser player with Kikianis next to him, I think.
Yeah. Yep.
We all thought it was the other way around, and it probably was to some extent, but it just goes to show how important that pairing was. It wasn't just about having the old bloke next to the young kid.
Yeah.
It was about how well they worked together.
That's right. And, having, obviously, it's, Adelaide as well has a pretty thin squad there. They've got not heaps of numbers in terms of first team players. So even just to get 3 or 4 great first team players back, I mean, that alone will make a huge difference. And these are players full of confidence as well, it's worth saying.
Yeah. Tommy, up north, Brisbane won, Melbourne Victory won. Opportunity, you'd say missed for both teams actually in a way. Like Victory needed points to sort of get into that conversation we've just talked about. Brisbane needed points, well, they got 1, but they needed 3 because they haven't had 3 at home for a full year now.
Yeah.
And they probably should have, right?
Well, Brisbane was, I think this is probably
How is that not a goal?
I know. And that was the story of the game. And I think that Melbourne Victory was just not at the races for the whole 90 minutes. Brisbane played them off the park. It was one of Brisbane's best performances of the season, no doubt, but I'm sure Zadikovic will be extremely frustrated because not converting that performance into a win. Great goal from Henry Hora there again, and he's been a revelation since he came back. But, for Melbourne Victory, the signs weren't great, to be honest. And I think that there's still very much a sense of they're playing within themselves, and Arthur Dillis hasn't really managed to put his mark on this team yet.
Are you more down on them than you are sort of encouraged by Brisbane in terms of the way they played? Because the way they played was good.
Yeah. I think if you look earlier in the season, Brisbane obviously had a really good performance at home against Sydney FC and lost the game to a last-minute goal. Similar kind of feel to this game. And, their performances this season haven't always been terrible, but it's a results-driven business. And, you're judged by wins and losses. And I think that they have a little bit of a soft underbelly defensively, and they haven't been able to rectify it.
Yeah. Tommy, another cracking game was MacArthur versus Sydney.
Yeah.
For me, the clear highlight when I was watching this game was, look, he had a good game overall, but there were a few minutes there where Douglas Costa was just absolutely unplayable. He didn't score from the chances that he had, but it looked like he was just making things happen on his own. And it's, for me, it's they signed him for this. He is now turning it on. Basically, they just need his hamstring to stay intact for the rest of the season, because if it is, they can go not only deep in the AFC Champions League 2 with their next game coming on Thursday in South Korea, but they can win silverware. If not, they can't win the title in terms of the Premier's play, but if they're in the top 6, talked about floaters before, you don't want to play them.
No way. And they're a different team when he plays. He's just that speed and that X factor in the front third. He also takes a lot of the pressure off Joe Lolly, because Sydney FC, I think that at times this season, when Costa hasn't played, has been too reliant on Joe Lolly. And it feels like if Joe Lolly doesn't get the ball and weave his magic, they're not going to create any chances, which is surprising given the other players they have in the front third. But that's kind of the way that it's manifested. And when Costa plays, the relationship they have together, and just having that kind of unpredictability of having both of them in the team and taking a bit of pressure off Caceres as well, I think that they're a different beast when he plays.
When he signed, it was bigger since Del Piero, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's true. How do you compare his on-field contribution to the one from Del Piero?
I think
It's an interesting question.
I think because of his injury, I think that it hasn't been as significant. But at the same time, we've seen enough from the games he has played to think that if he did play this, if he didn't get injured, I think that he could have done more than what Del Piero did in terms of on the field. But, because of that injury, and he obviously missed a lot of games, I think it's too early to tell. But there's still a lot of football to be played this season. If he takes Sydney FC with his performances, like against Macarthur, to the title or to silverware in the finals, then, I think that we can happily have that conversation.
Yeah. They got John Book, as I mentioned, on Thursday night in the AFC Champions League 2, away in South Korea. They're not going to be wanting to... if they're looking at those same highlights, they're a good team.
Yeah.
Successful in Asia historically, strong. But that's Douglas Costa, looking
right.
good.
Exactly. And that's the thing with Sydney FC, with these front third players, is that these are all players that have proven credentials overseas at the highest level. And, I think that it's intimidating to come up against players like that. But I think that, going back on Sydney FC, looking at that game, I think there's a lot of pressure on them on that game because it hasn't worked out for them the way they would have wanted in the A-League this season. They're essentially, if they don't win silverware in that Asian tournament, I think that people will heavily scrutinise their A-League form, so more heavily, I should say. So, there's a lot riding on that game for Sydney FC.
And some of Ufuk Talay's decisions as well. Was that another goal off the bench for Segicic?
That's right.
What's he got to do, man?
It's true. And sometimes, we've spoken about this. Sometimes if you do so well off the bench, you can kind of pigeonhole yourself as an impact player. But I think he's done enough to earn, more games from the start. But it'll be interesting to see because they've got to juggle both these tournaments in the coming rounds. So interesting to see what they do.
Be a good one to throw at John Book from the start, I reckon.
Yeah.
Just my call. Let's talk a little bit about Macarthur, Tommy. They're sinking. Before we dive into that, let's hear from Mile Sejovski, I guess, on the impact of a lot of their departures. Not only, I think they had 4 boys with the Young Socceroos, but they had a few departures during the January transfer window, and that's left them in a little bit of a hole.
When you've lost so many players in a window, it kind of stops the momentum a little bit. No, I didn't expect it. It's great for the club, and it's great to see what we're doing at the club and the environment we create to develop players and to sell players. At the same time, we're missing 4 with the young Socceroos, so it's difficult. That's nine players out from your regular squad. But like I said, in saying that, when people leave, others need to step up and take the opportunity, and I felt like we could have been better today.
They've brought in some reinforcements. They tried for Garang Kuol as well. We spoke about that a couple of weeks ago. That obviously hasn't happened. He's stuck with Newcastle United for the time being. He would have made a difference, I think. Yeah. But does he have a point there in terms of, as a coach, he's left holding the can here?
And when you consider, it's not only that he lost that many players, but when you consider the players he did lose, the likes of Jed Drew, Jermaine, these were players that were pivotal to the way they played every week. So, it takes new players time to adjust and to get used to playing with their new teammates. And, obviously getting players from Europe, it's obviously summer here, winter there's the fitness issues and the question marks that come with that. So I feel sorry for Mile because it's, he's been dealt a less than ideal hand, and obviously he touched on it. You have to give Macarthur a lot of compliments for the way that they've managed to develop and sell players. But the side effect is that you've lost a lot of the players that you were training so hard to achieve something this season. And I think it's going to be hard for them to find a way to get back into the 6, essentially.
Yeah. Tip of the cap for the crowd, 8,000 odd, the biggest crowd in Macarthur history, obviously helped by a large contingent of Sydney FC fans. But again, if you went to that game, you're coming back, I reckon. It was actually a good game to watch.
Absolutely.
And hopefully Macarthur can dig themselves out of the situation they're in and their reinforcements can step up. The other Western Sydney team, Tommy, the Wanderers, had a good win over Perth Glory. Let's hear from Archie Thompson on A-League Download. He's pretty keen on how they're looking at the moment.
But Western Sydney are a very good team.
I think that intensity.
Yeah,
I
and
like that.
Yeah, and the last time that they've put 3 wins together was like 2018. It's funny how something just sort of sits in this mind of mine. But and like I said, the transitional football is great. The understanding that those front 3 have. But again, I'll go back to Sapsford. Forget his Instagram stuff. But he's just. All-round football is just amazing. Like the way he scores his goals. I mean, he didn't score then, but if he's not scoring, he's setting him up. He sees great runs. He steps over the ball because he knows that someone's behind him. He's immediately spinning around to get that return. There was a ball that he played, and that was just before Hamid scored that tap in. That when he made the run out wide, that ball that he played across the Kriev, like for a number 9, that to be out there and playing in these wide positions, like he's a wide player as well. I think he's
and he had that shot that Oliver Sale saved.
Yeah, but
he shot from distance that was heading top corner, and he made a good save. So
You can watch A-League Download every Monday on YouTube. Tommy, I don't know about you, but I'm not as hot on the Wanderers as Archie is.
Yeah. I think in transition, though, I think, he obviously said how good they are in transition. I think in transition, they're probably the standout team in the league. I think that when they have to make the game, there's still question marks around them. They have scored the most goals of any team this season.
Does that mean they have the best attack in the league, though?
Well, on paper, no, because I think that, the likes of Sydney FC and other teams have better players individually, I would say. But ultimately, the mobility of their front third in transition is deadly. And I think that the issue for them and the reason that they probably haven't even been even better is because defensively they've obviously leaked so many goals. But I think that the lack of the reason that we're kind of sceptical about the Wanderers for me is more down to their defensive displays rather than their offensive displays. So and it's worth saying as well, the likes of Milanovic, Krajev, they're kind of sharing the load in the front third. There's no Noah Botic, for example, coming in and scoring all their goals. They've shared the load, and that can kind of sometimes make players go under the radar or make the team go under the radar. But I agree with Archie. I think they've been really good. It's
historic for me as well, though. There's been times in the past where the Wanderers have looked good and lost a key game or had a period of good form and then followed it with bad form. I'm not buying their stock just yet. They've got the bye this weekend. Yeah. They play Melbourne Victory at home next weekend. If they're fair dinkum, they're winning that game. Yeah. And if they win that game, then I'll start to be a little bit more, okay, what can they do? But until then, I'm just a little bit sceptical.
It's fair, and I think that if you look at Wanderers in seasons gone by, there's reason for you to have that view. But I think the one thing I can say that seems a little bit different this year maybe is that if you look at other seasons, the Wanderers have started really well and kind of tapered off, or they've imploded mid-season and they've tapered off towards the end, whereas they're doing the complete opposite this year. It's only now that they've been in the six, I think it's for the first time in the whole season almost. So the fact that they're climbing and finding form, obviously 3 wins in their last 4, it should be 4 wins, I have to say, because that game against Sydney FC, they were much better than Sydney FC in the last derby. So, they're making all the right noises at the right time of the season.
Yeah. I hope they do, because the league is better when the Wanderers are strong, and it's been a long time since the Wanderers were consistently strong. So I'm done waiting for it. I want it to happen. Tommy, home stretch of the season, time to look at the Johnny Warren medal a little bit at the moment. And it's an open race for me in terms of who you'd have. I think we've both been asked to put together a top 3 who'd be our leading candidates right now. And it's hard, man, because I think we all agreed that Jed Drew was probably leading the race before he left, or was close to.
Yeah, he was in the conversation for sure.
But he's gone now, so his body of work, it ends there. He can't. So I'd say he almost drops out. It's one of those seasons, though, where there's no super dominant player, no standout player, no standout goal scorer for that matter.
Yeah.
So gives you 3. And explain.
So Joe Lolly, and just because obviously we all know how good he is, but I think this season as well, in a team that's not necessarily fired on all cylinders at most of the time, he's pulled something out of the hat many times this season and has been sensational. My second one is a bit of a left field choice. I'm going to say Zach Clough from Adelaide. And the reason why, if you look, he's had, I think, 14 goal contributions in goals and assists this year, but his overall influence on Adelaide, I think he's indispensable to that team. And I think that a lot of their success is down to him. He's such an intelligent player. And, I think that a lot of the commentary around him in recent seasons has been quite harsh because he has been a little bit wasteful in front of goal. But this year he's been completely different. He's been much more decisive in terms of goals and assists. And for me, he's been sensational, and he has my second vote. The third one I found hard, but I probably have to say Noah Botic, just because of his breakthrough and his goals, and important goals as well for Western.
Yeah. So I got Lolly 1.
Yeah.
I think Angus Thurgate is not a bad shout. It's similar in terms of what you're saying about Clough to Adelaide United, his importance to the way they play. He's just been consistent, very good at the heart of a very good Western United team as well.
Yeah.
You'd imagine one of us would mention an Auckland FC player at some point, but the thing is there's so many good players there, and they're sharing the load so well.
That's right.
That they're all taking votes off each other potentially. Same goes for the Wanderers in terms of their forward players. Yeah. Milanovic has been really good. Borello had a great start to the season. Zasser's been good. All these guys are taking votes off each other though a little bit, which is why I've got Botic 3 as well, because when you've got an even race and dominant teams have competition for those votes, it paves the way for a leading goal scorer
Yeah.
to come through and collect votes just on the back of having scored so many goals.
It's true.
That's him at the moment, and it looks like he is. I'm backing him for the Golden Boot at the moment. And if that's the case, then
you got to.
I don't see why he can't attract enough votes to do it. The votes work. You're involved in the process.
Yep.
Everyone gets every game is a 3-2-1.
Yep.
Different categories of media or ex-players, etc., vote on it. So that's how it works. So it's not like they go 1/3 of the way through the season. What do you reckon?
No, it's total.
It's game based.
And you have to be very consistent to win the award. And, it's interesting what you said about Auckland, because obviously neither of us had an Auckland player, but I think if you were to put out a team of the season to date, you'd probably have 5 or 6 Auckland players in it.
Yeah, it's
but
just
none
hard
of them
to
have
pick
been
which
the
one
standout one.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
All right, let's check out what they were talking about this week on Dub Zone in the Ninja A-League. Melbourne City has been making history.
Coming up on Dub Zone, Reds keeper Claudia Jenkins will join us to talk all things Adelaide. After they knocked off the Knicks, City equals the greatest ever undefeated streak in Ninja A-League history, and an absolute belter from Sydney's captain rocks the Raw at Leichhardt. Teo and Teresa will join me again this week with some highlights.
Definitely happy to talk about Sydney's win after a long time coming, so super happy about that.
I'm going to put the heat on both of you, asking if the best defence in the league is starting to crack.
Ooh, big questions all to be answered. That's all ahead on Dub Zone on the A-League's YouTube channel, A-League's website and 10Play.
All right, make sure you check out Dub Zone on YouTube as per usual this week. Tommy, let's rip into extra time. We'll start with the announcement again of the A-League Pride celebrations coming up. As well, which is a great thing, only positive to enhance the feeling of accessibility and inclusion in the league. I think is really important. The Pride Cup doubleheader as well was on March 29 between Victory and Adelaide, the men's and women's games there. But I want to ask you about the Sydney FC Unity kit, which they've brought out. I can't believe it's taken them this long to do it. I reckon it's an absolute banger. Your thoughts?
Agreed. And we know how much we love talking about kits on this show, but for me it is definitely a fantastic kit. And talking about the Unity round, great initiative, and love to see more of it.
A change to the rules of football by IFAB. Goalkeepers now hold onto the ball for too long. At the moment it's 6 seconds. The change is it's going to be 8 seconds. And if you hold onto the ball longer than 8 seconds, you give away a corner kick.
Well, I think that, an indirect free kick in a dangerous position was probably a punishment not fit for the crime. Like, it's a pretty minor offence. So I actually am all for it, because anything that will encourage the game to speed up is a good thing. And I think that referees will be more willing to kind of pull it up if it's only a corner and not an indirect free kick that close to the goal.
If your life depended on it, which A-League player, past or present, would you want to take a penalty for you?
Good question. I'll have to say Mile Jedinak, I think. Obviously, we know how good he is at penalties with the Socceroos. We've seen it. We saw it his time in the Mariners as well. I can't remember him missing a penalty, actually.
Good point.
So that's my vote.
Mine's Jamie McLaren, all-time penalty goal scorer, and just doesn't leave goals on the table, let alone penalties.
Fair.
Macca, for me, which country would best suit Noah Botic if he moves overseas at the end of the season?
I reckon the Bundesliga. He's a kind of player who could play anywhere in Europe, I think, but I would love to see him in the Bundesliga, because we've seen so many Aussies go there and have successful stints there, and I think that would be a good fit.
This is good, and I don't care if we go over for this one because it's a good topic, and we sort of touched on it a little bit, but the Socceroos don't have any fit centre-backs.
Yeah.
Hayden Matthews now out for the season at Portsmouth. Harry Sutar gone. Sakati gone. So as things stand, who is the best, most informed, Socceroos eligible centre-half in the A-League right now?
It has to be Kiki Giannis, I think. Because if you look at what he did with the young Socceroos, obviously was a crucial part of them winning that tournament. Before that with Adelaide, he was a big part of the reason they were so successful so far this season. Still so young. I mean, even just from that perspective, similar to the way Hayden Matthews got introduced to the Socceroos, I'd love to see him get in there.
Completely agree. What was the best team talk you've ever seen in your career?
I think that if you look at the top 100 I ever had, they were all Ange Postecoglou. I think
But what's the one?
There's one he did. I think it was before a game against Kyrgyzstan. And it was one, when he became Spurs manager, it was trending on socials all over. Everyone had goosebumps. But it was funny. He used to do his team talks like an hour before the game, and you'd want to run through the wall out of the meeting, but you still had like an hour. So it was like that hour was pretty awkward. You had to try and keep the momentum, keep the vibe going. But his team talks were something else.
Tommy, another show in the books. Thanks very much. Hopefully see you next week as well on Total A-Leagues.